Okay, welcome to this video, and today what we're going to look at is drum tuning. One of the main things that we get asked all the time is how do we tune our equipment. So today I'm going to show you how to tune a snare drum, as well as pretty much how to deconstruct it, put on a brand new head and so on. So today I've got a snare drum, just a standard snare drum that you would probably find in most of your cores. So the first thing that you guys are going to need is a drum key. Okay, you can pick these up from pretty much almost any music store that sells drums. Yeah. So at the minute, this is a high tension drum key. So you can get these pretty much when you buy your high tension drums. You can also purchase them separately as well from most musical suppliers. So first thing that you've got to do is you've got to remember well, where you start. So I always like to go the closest to me. So the first one that I'm going to start from is right here, just in front of me, this tension rod right here. So whenever you're doing this, you want to always work in a start pattern, whether it is taking off the head or putting on a drum head. So first we're going to start off with removing this drum head. So what you want to do is you start to loosen it off. Once you feel it start to get a bit loose, you can then go ahead and remove the drum key, and you can use your finger on that one. And we'll go to the opposite one directly across. And what you'll find is as the rods loosen up, you're able to then use, oh, this one's popped out, so that's good. You're then able to go to the next one across. So it doesn't matter which direction you go. So I'm going to go to the next one along, to my left. And go opposite again. Go to the next one along. Okay, great. So the reason why we actually loosen those tension rods as we are trying to remove our head is just so that we can evenly lift up the drum head. Sometimes we can get, parts, nuts and bolts stuck on the inside of your drum. So sometimes it's not necessarily that your head needs changing, but you just need access. So it's always great to try your best not to damage your drum head and just allow it to gradually come up in a together. So it's not always, you don't want it to go slightly tight and then you loosen one side and it goes all the way up, and vice versa. So you want the head to come up nice and even. So now that we've gone ahead now and taken out all of our tension rods, we can then take up the hoop. And the hoop should just lift nicely off, like so. Okay, so I'm going to put this to one side. So now you've got your drum head. This is a great time, if you're not replacing your drum head, if you're just gaining access, to just give it a good check over. So you can do that for your drum head as well as your hoop. On this one, I'll go ahead and take it off. Okay, so our head is off. So obviously if you was changing your drum head, you would then obviously grab a new head and place it on. I always like to try and make sure that we have this lined up as well, nicely lined up with your lugs, so that everything kind of works. So I always go with the logo that is on your drum head, nicely centered with your lugs. So you just look over the top of it, place it on. Make sure your head is seated very nicely. Okay, great. So this one's seated quite nicely now. Looks great. So if we have a look now at our hoop, this is another moment where things get kind of dusty. A lot of dust collects in this part just underneath this hoop. So what we're going to do is we're going to give it a quick wipe. So we'll take out these tension rods. We'll just put them to one side for now. And I'll show you what we're going to do with these tension rods as well. This is a great opportunity. Anytime you take off your drum heads, you do this maybe, I don't know, once every 4 months or so, depends how often you play, and you just take it apart. You can get yourself a damp rag or a bit of tissue, and you just give the inside a nice clean. Okay. You can also use any drum polishes as well. You can get drum polishes again from any manufacturers and drum suppliers. Just give your hoop a nice clean. Gets rid of all that dust. Sometimes you can find little granules of sand or rocks depending on where you play and where you perform as well. You can pick up so many things from the surroundings. Okay, great. So now that we've cleaned this up, we're going to line it up nicely with your lugs. Okay, that's nice. We try our best not to move that logo because we like that nice central point. So once you've done that, now we're going to actually try and sort out our tension rods. Now remember that when metal and metal touch and we have, you know, the elements from outside, what can happen with metal and metal, we get a lot of rust and, you know, it starts to fuse together. We don't want that for these. So sometimes you probably have noticed that when you're tightening your drums or tuning your drums, you get a little squeaky sound. We don't really want that sort of sound. It just means that there's a bit of rust or there's a little something that's going on there. We don't want that. So I like inexpensive things that help us solve problems. So one of the things that we use at the moment is just simply a tub of Vaseline. Okay, this is accessible to everyone. You can get it from the hair shops, you can get it from Boots, you can get it from anywhere. So what I do with these, I just take about that much of it, just put it on the back of my hand. Go ahead and put that to the side. And what you do is you get the tension rod and you simply just roll just a little bit on the end. Okay, about that much on the end. Yeah, and then you just start to just place it, you know, just get it lined up. Go ahead and get the next one. Okay. So you'll find that even though this is, you know, this is a very accessible product, but it actually does last for the time that you actually need it to last. A lot of the time you can get all these mechanical greases, things that you use on cars and things. They do work as well, maybe a little bit better, but just for a nice inexpensive way to solve a problem, to make sure that you can maintain your drums, this is also a great option for you. Okay, awesome. Okay, great. Just going to take any of that excess, just wipe it off me for a minute. Lovely. Okay, great. So now that we've got our drum head on, we've lubricated our tension rods so that we don't have any issues with metal to metal contact on our threads on the inside of the lugs. Now what we'll do is we actually finger tight everything. So we still keep the same process of going opposites. So I'll go ahead and go from the opposite. Just get it to finger tight. We don't want to go all the way. We just get finger tight nicely. We go to the ones opposite. And we do the same again. Last batch. Fantastic. Okay, great. So our drum head is still a bit loose. Of course, we've only gone finger tight. So what we'll do now is we'll start to tighten it up. Now for tightening up drum heads, I always like to use 2 drum keys. It really does identify then that actual gradual tightening down of that togetherness that we mentioned earlier, even for when we're lifting off. So for brand new drum heads, you're going to find that there's a lot of tension already in that drum head. This one is fairly new. We've had it now for a few months, but it can take a little bit more of a stretch. So if you've got a brand new drum head, I would always say, okay, start with maybe 2 to 3 turns, see how you get on there, and then after that, you can figure it out. Okay, so for this drum head, I'm going to start off with about 3 turns. So now that everything's finger tight, I'm going to go about 3 turns all the way around, and then I'm going to see where we're at, and then we can go from there. So I've got both drum keys on opposite ends, so I'll do 3, 1, 2, 3. We'll go to the opposite sides. Okay, so I've now done the 3 turns all the way around the drum. I've kind of found that it's still not quite as tight as I'd like it, so I'm going to start to boost it in half turn increments or 1 turn increments, just so that I don't stress the head too much. I don't want it to pop. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do 1 extra turn for this drum head. So that sound that you're hearing is actually the drum head starting to stretch, which is what I kind of want. I want it to start to stretch. I quite like that sound. But I can tell from the feeling that I might need just another one. This time I'm going half, so not full turns. Okay. Now when I say a turn, a lot of people get confused by this. When I say a turn, what I'm looking for is, it's not a full 360 turn. What you'll find is that your natural rotation of your hand will probably only give you about 90 degrees or 180 degrees. So that'll be pretty much your full turn. Yeah. So when you're doing halves, it'll probably be about 90 degrees, you know, or so. So you've just got to kind of try and figure out what your natural turn would be. But the general rule of thumb, brand new drum head, you're looking at about 2 turns, 2 to 3 turns first time round, then half turn increments just to try and get it all nicely seated. Alright, cool. So now that we've kind of tightened up this head, the tuning process is still not complete. At the minute we've got a bit of a loose snare wire, which on this drum is at the bottom. It only has 1 snare wire, it's just a traditional snare drum. So we're going to go ahead and start to look at that on the bottom, and we'll look at that system and I will explain that to you. Okay, now we are on the resonant side of this snare drum. So what you'll notice is that we've got the snare wires here, okay, along the drum head. So on the side, what you will notice as well is that I've got this snare lever system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. Okay, and all that does is it drops the snare wire off the drum head. When it's turned on, it is then pressed against the drum head. So what we're going to do is we're going to just loosen that off for a minute. I'll show you as well how to remove this, just so that you, in case you ever do need to change over your snare wires. So on both ends, so this is known as the butt end. So this is the butt end of the snare wire system, and that is your lever side of the snare wire system. So I always like to try and go from either end. It doesn't really matter which side you go from. I'm going to go ahead and loosen off this side. So you see how you've got 2 rods here, 2 bolts here that you can loosen off. You just need to loosen these. You don't need to unscrew them totally. You only want it to just come off. It's just a clamping system that squeezes against the snare tape. Okay, do you see that? So this is a great example, to be honest with you, for a snare drum that actually needed a bit of love. Can you see this residue here? Okay, that is not oil, that is actually water. Okay, so that's water mixed with a bit of grease as well that's come from the actual system itself. Oil and rust and all those things. So I'm glad that we kind of chose this drum today to actually take apart. So I'll go ahead and give this a wipe and just give the snare system a good old clean as well, just to get rid of that. We don't want that on any of our equipment. So once I've done that, we can loosen off the other side also. Remember, we're just loosening it, we're not taking it apart totally. Fantastic. So the snare wire are off. and they look just like that. So from these, what you want to look at is you want to try and just give it a little pull and just make sure that the spacing between the wires are nice and even. Once they're nice, if they're nice and even and they look pretty good, this one looks not too bad at all, then your snare wire is in good nick. If it's got big gaps in it, you know, where you've dropped it or anything like that, you probably might need a new snare wires. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put these to the side. So let's look at this resonant head here. So this resonant head, it's not too bad at all. This one is also fairly new. So we'll go ahead and remove this one. Now the resonant head is thinner. What you'll find is that the head that we've just tuned up a little bit, so the batter head itself it's got two layers on it. It's got two layers of it's like a plastic type of sheeting that they use for these drum heads. Whereas the resonant head, this bottom drum head here, it's only got one layer. So we need to be a little bit more delicate with it. It's not as robust, it can't be stretched as aggressively, so we just need to be very careful here. So I'm going to go ahead and use my 2 drum keys to loosen this one up and raise it up nicely, because I'm going to use the same drum head and make sure that it's not damaged as much as I can. So fingers crossed guys, let's try and see if we can get this done. So you guys heard that, that's the release of tension. So I just loosen those off and just use my fingers. You can keep it going with the drum key, but I like to maintain the same process. Okay. So as we start to remove this, nice and equal. So like I said, you can keep the drum key on the rods. You can use your fingers, start to lift those up. So again, everything is opposites, always working opposites. Okay, awesome. Okay, so now that I've removed all those tension rods, same process again, where we remove the hoop. Put that on one side, and once again you would remove your resonant drum head. Okay, so as you can hear, it's a little bit thinner than what the other one was. So this is just one layer, remember, so we've got to be very careful with this. Try and encourage any new guys that you have in your cause not to play on this. Because it does actually just go straight through. It doesn't even have any resistance really on it to actually take a strike from a drumstick. Okay, so I'm going to reuse this and I'm just going to check my shell just to make sure I haven't got any issues, which I don't, which is awesome. Just make sure that it's free of debris or anything like that. And we're going to go ahead and line it up like we did the previous one. Line it up in line with the logo of the actual drum head and your lugs. Okay, great. I'm happy with that. So we're going to go ahead as well and give our hoop a clean, just how we did before. So I'll take out the rods for now while we give this a quick clean. So one of the, I guess, a better product to use for cleaning your stuff, like I say, we can use, drum cleaner. You can also use a microfiber cloth. Microfiber cloths are great. You can get those pretty cheap, maybe £5 from for a pack of 5 from Halfords. So you can pick these up really cheap, just to get rid of the dust and any bits of sand or anything like that you can find in these hoops. Okay, great. So what you want to do is you want to align your slots that you've got for the snare wires. You want to align those in line with your snare system. So I'm going to put that just in line nicely, it's all seated perfectly. Lovely. Okay, so the same process applies with our Vaseline that we're going to use. Again, very cheap products that you guys can pick up from anywhere. So we'll do the same process. I'll use a little less because I think I used too much in the previous one. So I've got that on my hand. Same process again. Just roll that in there, just a little bit, just to give it a little bit of lubrication. Same again here. So you guys will notice that the same way, you kind of work in a backwards process when you're putting everything back together. Okay, so now that we've got those in place, we go ahead again, we do finger tight. All the way around. So for these type of snare drums, like I say, most of you will have a snare drum that looks similar to this. What I like to kind of go with about 2 to 3 tons, and normally that kind of does it for this drum head. I kind of want it to still vibrate quite nicely, so it shouldn't be as tense as your batter head. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to give it, we'll start off with 2 tons, and then we'll go from there, see how she starts to look. Once we've done that, once we've tightened this up, we'll then look at putting the snare wires back on. So I'll start the closest to me. Okay, so that's 2 turns. This one is nearly there, it's not bad at all, it's pretty good. So I think what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to give it a half turn. Nice. So that's pretty good, that's a nice tension. That's not a bad sound either. So now we just have to give it that snare sound that we're looking for, right? So we're gonna loosen these a little bit more so that we can actually start to get the snare tape through it. This is kind of a little bit of, it's almost a little bit of textiles here where we've got to make sure we thread it through. So I'm gonna show you guys the plates in a minute that I'm talking about. Hopefully you guys can see it on camera. So if I look at this, we've got these plates that are right here. There's 2 plates that are here. That's where I need to fit my snare tape through. These 2 plates that are right here. So if I can get those the tape through there, then that will start the process. So we'll go ahead and get the snare wires. Okay, some snares you need to thread these through the actual hoop itself, but this one is just a, it's got a slot. So here what we'll do is we'll start off with one side. We'll try try and slip it in. Hopefully it all slides in nice. Once I've got it in, and I've got to just make sure I sandwich those two plates against the snare tape. So note guys, I started from this side, the butt end side. The reason why I started with the butt end side is because that bit's not adjustable. The other side is adjustable, so then I can adjust it how I want it on that other end. So once I've got the snare tape in, got it to kind of where I want it, that means it's in place. And then I can adjust it exactly how I want it on this side. But I think for this one I might need to go a little bit more in. I'm going to go a little bit more in with this one. So I'll loosen it up a little. Okay, tighten that up. Okay, great. Now that I've done that, on this side, same process. So remember that the snare wire is off at the minute. So what I don't want you guys to do is push this all the way in to the point where it's super tight and it becomes a problem. We don't want to do that. What we do want to do is get it to a point where it could be adjusted. Okay, so I'm going to slip this one in. So I've got a little bit of play in there, just so it can be adjusted. You can also loosen this. It drops the snare system a little lower as well. You can loosen it and tighten it so it can adjust the snare system itself. So then you go ahead and tighten that up. So once you've tightened it up, then you can start to pull that snare system. Normally if it's too easy to pull up, it's probably a little too loose. So that one felt a little bit too easy. So what you want to do is you turn it back off again and you tighten this up. What that will do is it will pull this area this way. It will pull it towards the top of the drum. So that it actually starts to pull it. And you notice that's a little harder to pull back down together. So now that we've done that, that's in place, the snare wires are in place, we've tuned our resonant head, and we've also tuned our batter head. Okay. Now your drum is put back together, and it should start to sound a bit more like a snare drum. So hopefully we've got the tuning right, and that doesn't sound too bad. Make sure you guys like and subscribe, and if you've got any questions, hit it down in the comments.